How's it going, my friends? I'm Jakejames Lugo, and welcome to the channel. Now today we're just going to get a little bit artsy with our game talk, because today we're talking about Shadow of the Colossus, specifically the 2018 remake that was over on the PlayStation 4. Now some of you may have already played this game, or even played the original on PS2, so you might have an iota of where I'm going with this review, but for all of you that haven't yet, this might be a treat for you, because this is a game that really pushes the envelope and hits a lot of those chords when it comes to talking about games as an art form. Shadow of the Colossus is an action-adventure game originally developed by Team ICO in 2005 for the PlayStation 2. The game we're talking about here, however, is a remake of that game for the PlayStation 4, which was made by Bluepoint Games and published by Sony in 2018. Everything was completely redone visually, but the gameplay and the plot remained the same. Shadow of the Colossus tells a story that starts off one way and gradually changes the more you get deeper into it. You're given very little to go on in the original game, but the remake does offer some more insight that fleshes out into a really intriguing narrative. A young man carrying a deceased young girl rides into a temple standing within a forbidden land, cut off from the rest of the world by mountains and terrain. The Wanderer, as we come to know him, wants to resurrect this girl named Mono. Apparently she was sacrificed in a ceremony before the start of the game, and the Wanderer is super pissed about it. In order to bring her back to life, he seeks the aid of a mysterious entity known as Dorman. According to the myths within the game's lore, Dorman is said to have the power of resurrection. However, he's disembodied and needs help regaining his power that's sealed away by 16 Colossus roaming the Forbidden Land. It's here that the Wanderer is tasked with his faithful horse Argo to seek out and destroy the wandering Colossi, which will help recover Dorman's power to revive Mono. But not everything is exactly what it might seem for the young man. And as the story continues, we see what dark intentions are at work behind the scenes, leading to an impactful and shocking conclusion. It's a truly mythic tale with a visual style that makes everything we see happen feel both gracious in motion and epic in scale. Now from the jump, I will say that I did play the original game on PlayStation 2, I just never completed it back then during its initial release, and I also got a chance to play the remaster of this game on the PlayStation 3 when it was paired up with ICO. It was kind of given like a bunch of new fixed up graphics, it looked a little bit cleaner, but it was still essentially the same game. On top of that, at least for this review, what was kind of cool was that the first time I played Shadow of the Colossus, the remake, was at PSX one year. I actually got to play this game in 4K on a PS4 Pro, and my god, the visuals of this game looked fantastic, but imagine seeing all this stuff in 4K. It was running at 30 frames per second, so it wasn't as fast as the regular version of the game, but it was still pretty darn cool because this game looks fantastic. It looks very whimsical, very mythic, very kind of, fantasy oriented. Granted, there is a couple things fixed up with the remake as opposed to the original, but this game still looks fantastic. If I'm being real, however, I will say that some of the story beats and the plot points of this game might turn some people off because you're not given a whole bunch of information. If anything, in the remake, you're given a little bit more and it's kind of fleshed out much more nicely than it was in the original. But for some people that just want their story elements just given to them straight up and not really kind of given all this kind of mystery and all this crazy stuff that's hidden from you until the very end, you might be turned off by this game. However, if you just roll with it, at least in my personal opinion, I feel like you'll still enjoy it, even though a lot of the bigger things don't happen till 3/4 of the game in. At least once you start getting to much more of the deeper stuff involving the world that you're involved in, the Forbidden Lands, Dorman himself, the Wanderer, and some of the other kind of characters that you meet up with much later on. With that aside, let's talk about gameplay because I feel like there's a lot to discuss with Shadow of the Colossus because it did a lot of things back in the day, but there is a couple things I do want to touch on that are pretty freaking important. If you're playing this game for the first time, don't expect a traditional action-adventure approach here. This is what people consider a boss rush game, where there isn't any small enemies to fight per se, just massive boss fights that go on throughout the entire experience. But before we get to that, let's touch on something very important. If there's one thing I can harp on Shadow of the Colossus for, it's the controls and the camera. I don't feel that this part of the game has aged well. I know a lot of people swear this game is a masterpiece, but I feel the issues with the controls and the camera that pop up can really damage the experience. Everything in the remake is identical to the original game, with a few slight alterations here and there. Controlling the Wanderer and riding Argo looks beautiful as you travel around, but it can be a real pain when you're trying to steer your horse in a certain direction and find yourself running into an invisible wall or off to the side on accident. It's like there's a drag to the direction you move while on horseback, with Argo's speed that constantly needs to be maintained. Unlike other controls for other games that came afterwards, such as The Witcher 3 or Zelda Breath of the Wild, riding your horse in Shadow of the Colossus just feels very stiff, almost restrictively annoying at times. And then there's this damn camera. For real, this is probably the worst part of the game. I understand that the camera here was made in 2005, but there are some moments where I wish the remake had more changes done to this. You'll constantly see the flickering of objects within your view, as well as everything that's happening getting obscured by things that are all up in your face. Some people will say that this adds some of the challenge to the game's battles, but I don't feel this is a good thing. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I fell off something or was killed by a Colossus because my sight of everything was blocked off. It's a real problem I think that a lot of people ignore and excuse all too often. There are times when the camera likes to pull back and show you the sense of scale of everything, which looks cool in some cases, but in others it can prevent you from getting a handle on the situation and completely messing you up. Okay, real talk, the camera has to be your worst enemy in the entire game, much more so than the Colossi that you fight throughout. It's just so annoying and frustrating to deal with. Even on some of the easiest battles against some of the Colossi, it's just annoying to deal with. Like, certain objects in the world, or even the limbs of the Colossus itself, and even just parts of the Wanderer as you're kind of climbing up things, could get obscured by the camera, totally blocking out your view of certain sections. That type of stuff I just can't forgive, and I see so many people give that element of the game a pass just because of the year and the time frame when it was actually developed, especially back on the PlayStation 2. This is something that I feel like in the 2018 remake should have been fixed up a little bit better or adjusted for the better to make it less frustrating. I know they say that they did, and they kind of did adjust a couple other elements with the controls and other stuff here and there, but the camera to me is still just as frustrating as it was back then. Like, personally for me, I could deal with the controls of the game, whether it's on horseback with Argo or just moving around as the Wanderer exploring the world around you. That type of stuff I could deal with. It's just, again, you spend a couple minutes with it, you could get into the groove of things. But the stuff with the camera, man, it's just so annoying to me. I feel like they really needed to do more with that part of the game because it would have just made everything else about Shadow of the Colossus, the remake, so much more better. But what about the fights themselves against the different Colossi? Are they still just as good as what many people remember, or even, maybe even better than that? Without question, the absolute best part of Shadow of the Colossus are the gargantuan battles you have against each of the 16 Colossi. They are majestic, large-scale battles that can be intense and wild in different ways. Searching for a Colossus is an event in of itself, as you use your sword to light the direction you need to travel and graciously trot your way over there. You could take in a lot of the beautiful environments while traveling, but as soon as you get close enough, the tone shifts into an epic reveal of your next foe. Each one of the battles against the Colossi has similar elements to them, such as the weak points on their bodies. How you get to them each time is part of the game's clever design. You need to scale their large limbs and attack their glowing weak points, while also trying not to get squished in the process. Things start off simple at first with the first few beasts you take down, but as you defeat more of them, each new fight presents you with a new problem for getting to your objective. They're challenging and will test your patience more often than not. What's annoying is how these solutions aren't always obvious or conveyed well to you at first. There was a few times I had to look up a guide to know exactly what to do for a given Colossus. But once you have a grasp on everything, these fights can be amazing. The heights you scale atop a Colossus give you these really amazing views as you're holding on to dear life and the beast is trying to shake you off. My issues that I mentioned before about the game's camera aside, I really like how each Colossus you fight feels like a grand event. Some battles are definitely shorter than others, but they're given the same reverence and excitement as everything else. But I do have to say that while I enjoyed these fights, the very last battle is the most frustrating. The 16th Colossus is a fight where you have to make your way towards a giant tower and climb up to reach your target, who by the way is shooting fire blasts at you the entire time. Getting there is not that bad, but once you're climbing up to reach its weak points, things take a sharp turn for the worse. The camera is absolutely atrocious here when trying to make those big jumps and move around as you hold on to the climbable areas. There's one spot where the final jump requires you to shoot an arrow at a glowing target, but you wouldn't know that you have to do that because your view gets constantly blocked towards the place that you need to fire at. It also doesn't help that your view also gets blocked by all the effects from the fire and the rain that really disorient your sense of distance for the jumps. Out of all the battles in Shadow of the Colossus, I died and restarted here the most. That being said, however, did I still enjoy fighting all of the Colossi throughout the game? I could definitely say I liked the journey and really enjoyed some of the battles, but that definitely doesn't mean that some of them couldn't have been tweaked to flow a little bit better. To be totally honest with all of you, there really isn't much else I could say about the core gameplay or just the battles against the different Colossi in Shadow of the Colossus. It still plays very similar to the original version on PS2 and the remaster and such, but to me, this is still the gold standard when it comes to boss rush style of games that many other titles that came afterwards were really inspired by. Now, I should mention there is a couple little goodies that you could find while exploring the world, including finding these lizards that have these white tails that you could consume, and these pieces of fruit that are high up in trees. When you shoot them down and eat them, you can increase not only your health meter, but also your grit meter as well, which is a huge asset when you're going up against the different Colossi. Now, another thing I do want to touch on is something that a lot of people who have played this game haven't really interacted with a whole lot, because there's some interesting aspects to it that I feel like still need improvement that is kind of meh. But there's other stuff to this involving the extra content that is actually really interesting. Now, while we don't get anything drastically new content-wise in the remake, there is some extra stuff that is noteworthy. Besides the visual upgrade with higher resolution textures, the HUD to the game was revamped and looks cleaner than before. The biggest addition in the remake, however, that wasn't in the original game is the Sword of Dormin, which can be unlocked after you collect 79 relics hidden throughout the game. This is a powerful sword that's hidden below the temple once you collect every relic. Equipping the sword increases your attack power, but also lowers your health regeneration. It'll definitely take you a long time to gather everything to unlock it, but is it really worth the struggle? Yeah, if you're a completionist, but for me personally, I didn't feel like doing so. I was good without it. There's a bunch of other bonus stuff for completing the game multiple times, with the remake fine-tuning a few of these extras. Now, I didn't do this personally for my own review here, but I did look up everything just to see what you got. You can fight every Colossus again from the temple in a time attack mode, which unlocks bonus items and weapons that can make you stronger and even change the appearance of Argo. These are the best extras of the game because they're pretty tough to complete, but their effects really change up different parts of the gameplay. There's also a gallery that showcases artwork from the game's development, which unlocks new items every time you reface a Colossus. While I might not have wanted to get all this extra stuff myself, I do respect the effort that went into adding bonuses like this. It really rewards players that really tried their hardest to complete everything. Now, my only major complaint about any of the extra content, even though I didn't really interact with this too much, is the fact that we don't get a bonus Colossus fight in the remake. That to me is such a huge missed opportunity. I know that Bluepoint and some of the people over at Sony Japan talked about this, that they had no intention of adding extra content like that to the game, but man, that would have been so cool and a really good bonus thing to give people that have been fans of this series something brand new to interact with. I mean, maybe they just ran out of ideas or they didn't really want to mess with the integrity of the original game. I could totally understand that, but personally for me, if we're talking about something that's a real big pull for people to dive into a remake, that would have been the thing to do. Even if it was just one extra boss fight. Maybe an extra boss fight that's not canon to the story, fighting against Dormin or something, but just give me something. I felt like that would have been so freaking awesome to see. So to sum it all up, can I recommend that you guys check out the Shadow of the Colossus remake on the PlayStation 4? Yeah, if you're someone that really likes gaming as an art form or wants to try something else a little bit different that's not necessarily the typical action-adventure game, then I feel like you should definitely play Shadow of the Colossus. Do I think that you'll get a little bit more out of it if you played the original releases or the remastered version on the PlayStation 3 beforehand? yeah, you might have a little bit more of an appreciation of what they're doing with the remake, but if you're just someone that's brand new that never once played this game before, the remake is probably the best version of it that I feel like you're going to get the most out of, even if you just know nothing about Shadow of the Colossus or Team ICO or any of this stuff. I definitely do think that certain elements of the game have not aged too well, that especially with the camera could have been improved so much more better, but that doesn't really take away from the beautiful visuals of the game, the interesting and intriguing story, and just overall a different approach to making a video game that I felt like a lot of other games afterwards really took inspiration from. If you're someone that really wants to try something very different, this is the best way to go. And there you go, everyone. Those are my thoughts about Shadow of the Colossus Remake on PlayStation 4. I was lucky enough to get this game when it was a free downloadable for PlayStation Plus, but you can find this game for pretty cheap right now. And personally for me, I think it's a must-play for anybody that's interested in games that really push the medium forward as an art form, because it's very different than your typical action-adventure game, but it still is doing a lot of interesting and neat things. It's like watching an old classic movie where there's still problems with it or things that could have been improved by today's standards, but that in no way takes away from just some of the interesting and really iconic things that it was doing back then. But like anything else that we review here on this channel, that's just my opinion about it. Let me know your thoughts about Shadow of the Colossus Remake down below in the comments section. Tell me, are you a fan of the original game? Do you like the remake? Do you hate the remake? Which I don't even know how you can, but what are some elements that you liked or disliked about the game? Or what other stuff that you think that Team ICO did was actually pretty interesting or kind of cool? Tell me about that stuff down below in the comments section. Hey there everyone, thanks for watching this video. I appreciate all of your support as always. On the side here I have some game reviews and other cool videos you might like to watch. Make sure you leave me a comment down below and subscribe to the channel too. Don't forget to hit that bell icon to be in the know when I post up new videos for you to check out. I'll talk to you all again real soon. Peace out and stay epic everybody.